This is a video that you and I have wanted to make for months now. Thank you guys so much. The feedback on the George series was incredible. And this format that we've been doing for the last couple of years has been working really well, doing these deep dives into training a dog over many weeks to see the kind of results we get. I love that you guys are loving it so much. And our next one, well, you tell me if you're still loving it after that, because that is the closest I have come to retiring from dog training, I think. But right now, I think we really have to talk about this huge news in the dog training world that's recently happened. This is probably the biggest news in my dog training career. I've been training dogs, I think, 17 years. Like, I don't know the exact year.
Has it been that long?
I know.
Oh my gosh.
There's a new position statement as it relates to dog training from the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior.
Yes, AVSAB.
AVSAB, that's right. So we're probably going to be calling them AVSAB quite a bit throughout this video, for short. Amongst dog trainers, I think today's video is going to be pretty controversial. We really want to thank Nom Nom for sponsoring this episode. Really good product. There's a lot of ways to feed your dog a quality diet. Nom Nom is one of the freshest options available, and it meets the delicate nutrition standards of dogs, something that is shockingly hard to get right on your own. Their nutrition experts prepare fresh meals with all of the right nutrients for your dog, and they automatically ship them right to your door. So literally all you have to do is open up a packet and give your dog an amazing, very healthy meal. As someone who really appreciates when things are quick and easy, I absolutely love this. If you think your dog would love Nom Nom, you can get 50% off a 2-week trial at my special link, trynom.com/Zach. I'll have that link in the description. My true hope when making a video like this is that I'm hoping that we, as a dog training community, especially here on YouTube, because that's where I live, that we can really get together and try to understand this news better. What does it mean for various dog trainer influencers out there?
Yeah, this is the dog training world. I did not know until I entered it is such an active community. Like, you guys really go to town about talking about stuff.
However anyone trains dogs, I think anyone in this profession is very passionate about dogs and their well-being, and we all love them. That's why we get into dog training, right? It would be even more amazing if some of the influencers out there in the dog training space, people like Cesar Millan, Victoria Stillwell, Emily Laurelham, Kiko Pup.
Oh, Kiko Pup, yeah.
We love her. And of course, our buddy, Trevor from Doggy Dojo. Upstate Canine, Canine 1, Ian from Simpatico. Would like to know what Nando, Joe, and Dean from
School of Canine Science. Yeah, they're cool.
Beckman, Balabanov, McMillan, McCann.
You sure know a lot. This is like, I keep thinking your list is exhausting. I know, it's a huge, amazing community. There's so many people that I think are going to want to talk about this.
A lot of different perspectives out there, for sure. I know I am forgetting a ton of you that I talk to out there, so forgive me for that. And if there's any dog trainers that you guys respect out there that you would like to talk about this, let them know. I think the thoughts on this would be very valuable. Now, many of you might not have heard of the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior.
It's because their target audience is vets, veterinarians, and professional behaviorists, more than just the general public. Most veterinarians don't specialize in animal behavior.
Very, very good point. There is a subset of vets that definitely specialize in the science of animal behavior, more specifically dog behavior in our case. So basically, vets who don't specialize in behavior and are a member of this organization look to them to get guidance on training dogs. Then they can check with a trusted organization like this to see what the latest cutting edge science has to say.
So they just want to make sure that they have all of that information available so that veterinarians around the country and world can advise their clients with an informed opinion.
And it's worth noting, AVSAB members have to meet a very high bar in terms of education to be a part of this organization.
Members of AVSAB are board-certified veterinary behaviorists, research scientists, veterinarians with a special interest in behavior, certified applied animal behaviorists, doctors of veterinary medicine with behavior specialties, PhD in animal behavior or related discipline.
Impressive, yeah. I mean, these are people who understand science. So this isn't an association of professional dog trainers or anything like that. These are among the most educated, dedicated professionals who are focused on how animals learn.
I've taken a few animal behavior classes, and I can tell you that I was surprised how intricate it is. It's a very intricate science.
It is.
And challenging to study.
And I know there's a lot of setup here. We're about to get into it right now, But I do want to preemptively say that I know a lot of people in our industry, the dog training world that is, really are skeptical of academia because it is not the real world and things, and we're going to actually talk about that later.
It's a legit criticism.
Absolutely, sure. I particularly love stuff like this because Bree and I are significant science enthusiasts, but also I get a lot of experience on the ground, so to speak, with dogs, working with them every day, trying to implement a lot of the methods that we learn from people like this. To be clear, not a scientist, just an enthusiast, so I'm going to do my best to be accurate here, but I'm hoping some of our science-minded people will be involved. We're going to be using the term aversive a lot today. How do we mean aversive for purposes of this conversation?
Dog training people usually use aversive to refer to unpleasant physical corrections or training consequences that a dog would want to avoid or escape.
I'm sure the term aversive tools will come up a time or two as well. And by that, we're referring to things like choke chains, prong collars, electric collars. Also slip leads count. Basically anything used in a way that causes a dog to feel either physically unpleasant or emotionally unpleasant. But it's always tricky in animal behavior, isn't it? Because you can never know what a dog is feeling. We can think about the traditional example. If a dog pulls, one training strategy is to pop the leash really quickly to discourage them from pulling. That would be an aversive method. Another example, using squirt bottles when dogs are barking. I shouldn't laugh about that. It's not nice to dogs, but I must confess, really early in my career, I used to do that. So definitely.
You did?
I did. I know, it's a bombshell.
When?
Maybe 04.
Like in training classes?
Yeah, like in training classes.
Are you serious?
I wouldn't do it today, but you know, that's learning for you.
So I feel like, very briefly, you should explain what the position statement has been, you know, broadly up until now, because it's made some changes, minor changes over the years, but this is dramatic. So what was it before?
My understanding of their original position was basically that you should try positive reinforcement first with training. Make sure that you're addressing any underlying emotional issues to the best of your ability, making sure that you're controlling your dog's environment. Be sure that you're limiting their access to things that might cause them to behave undesirably, and try counter-conditioning methods to change their association. If you tried all of those in good faith and you felt like they weren't working well enough, that is when it may have become appropriate for a trainer to use aversives, potentially. So that has been their position as long as I can remember in my dog training career when it came to their advice on animal welfare.
The first time I read that, my honest first thought was that sounds a lot like what most people call balanced training.
Yes, and most balanced trainers that I know really do their best to have a heavy emphasis on positive reinforcement training.
Yeah, that's true. It's like mostly positive reinforcement, right? But then aversives in some cases.
Right, exactly. And just to try and be as open and transparent of my biases as reasonably possible, because that's important when making a video like this, I subscribe to the idea of using the least aversive method that's likely to work. But personally, I've never crossed into using choke chains, prong collars, or electric collars. Many trainers have found value in using aversive tools and methods, and they would be justified based on that former criteria of AVSAB. And that's why this new statement is such a bombshell in our industry. We're going to unpack this in detail in this video, but just listen to these 4 sentences.
Based on current scientific evidence, AVSAB recommends that only reward-based training methods are used for all dog training, including the treatment of behavior problems. Aversive training methods have a damaging effect on both animal welfare and the human-animal bond. There is no evidence that aversive methods are more effective than reward-based methods in any context. AVSAB therefore advises that aversive methods should not be used in animal training or for the treatment of behavior disorders.
Their position right now is no choke chains, no prong collars, no electric collars for any reason at all, ever. I mean, and I say that, like, I'm shocked by this because scientific thinkers do not use such terminology loosely. Think about it, all of those trainers who sometimes use aversive tools were justified under the prior position statement, but under this new one, they are in violation.
AVSAB is telling their clientele like your veterinarian, that they should not recommend the use of those tools or trainers who advocate for them in any known situation.
So if you're a vet, you're part of this organization, you have a trainer that you've been working with, maybe because dog training isn't your thing, they use choke chains, prong collars, e-collars, you would be at conflict with AVSAB. How does that change things right there?
This is something that I know a lot of people are taking really seriously, ourselves included, because it's affecting a lot of people, their livelihood. I mean, it's affecting dogs, but it's affecting trainers too.
That's what I'm really hoping to examine here, because a statement like that can, like you said, affect people's careers. A huge percentage of dog training facilities out there in the world are really using these tools every day in their business. And again, to be upfront, I'm partial to not using aversive corrections in training. And also, despite my best intentions, I do resort to them from time to time, as you've seen in my videos before. Speaking from personal experience, using positive reinforcement has helped me do incredible things with my dogs in the past. And you've seen, like in our hundreds of videos that we have on the channel, how positive reinforcement sometimes works with most of the dogs. But, and this is the important thing, I can't know what my results would have been had I been using different methods like choke chains, prong collars, or electric collars. Maybe I would have done even better. I mean, that's what we can't know from my personal story.
Way to critically think.
Thank
Nice.
you. And really, no one should take my anecdotes or my stories serious. They don't matter any more than anyone else's. That's why we have to have scientific study. I mean, that's the value of science. It's the best tool we have to getting at what's true.
Yeah, science is awesome. The AVSAB statement has a ton of studies referenced. There are, I think, 21. We read them all, but then every one of them also references studies.
It's been pretty interesting, and not all of them come to the same conclusion by any means.
There's a ton of information in those studies, but there are a lot of red flags too. And so we felt like rather than just sharing the position statement, we wanted to make this video.
We spent a lot of time giving these studies a critical eye. We really tried to be objective. Of course, no one can do that like scientists can.
We also tried our best to find what other dog trainers, other professionals are saying about this, and we wanted to go over some of those objections, the main ones that we at least were able to find.
And I think we should talk about how this is going to change the way that I train dogs moving forward too. It's not, it's just a 4-page document. It's about 4 pages,
Yeah.
Is that right here? And so you can look at it yourself. We're going to hit some of the highlights of it.
Yeah, AVSAB. Position statement on humane dog training. Evidence supports the use of reward-based methods for all canine training. AVSAB promotes interactions with animals based on compassion, respect, and scientific evidence.
Yeah, sounds pretty sound to me. A pretty good rule of thumb.
Based on these factors, reward-based learning offers the most advantages and least harm to the learner's welfare. Research supports the efficacy of reward-based training to address unwanted and challenging behaviors. There is no evidence that aversive training is necessary for dog training or behavior modification.
Yeah, just to be clear, there's nothing here claiming that using aversive training methods are ineffective. I mean, they definitely are saying that they work. There's just no advantage known for using aversive training methods and tools.
Even, I guess to be even more carefully scientific, it's just that there's not evidence that aversive training is necessary for dog training or behavior modification.
Great distinction, well said.
Reward-based techniques should be used for teaching common training skills as well as to address unwanted behaviors. The application of aversive methods, which by definition rely on application of force, pain, or emotional or physical discomfort, should not be used in canine training or for the treatment of behavioral disorders.
Acknowledged. So for no reason, not aggression, not anything.
When dogs have serious aggression issues, it's a desperate situation. And of course, you try whatever you think will work the best. And so that's a common place where people have gone down that list of things that AVSAB said were good to do and said, this dog is still, I am still having a lot of problems.
Right.
Maybe aversives. But now here, this is a dramatic about face from that. As the role of companion animals has evolved, their welfare and the relationships between humans and animals have become increasingly important. It is understood that animals are sentient and should be treated with respect and compassion. I like that.
I do. I think that trainers who use aversive methods entirely agree with that statement as well. It's hard to imagine anyone who works with dogs that wouldn't truly feel those words.
Learning manners and skills can help animals to coexist harmoniously with people in the home and in society. The techniques used to teach those manners and skills can strongly affect an animal's future behavior and emotional well-being. Training methods are most effective when they focus on teaching the animal what to do rather than punishing them for unwanted behaviors. Common training issues such as jumping, barking, and house training can be managed by arranging the environment appropriately and reinforcing desirable responses. More serious behavior concerns such as aggression, anxiety, and fear require a treatment plan that includes environmental management, behavior modification, and in some cases, medication. Environmental conditions that drive the behavior should be addressed, like managing their environment. I've heard that one before.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And the dog should be set up to make appropriate responses. Management can include avoiding situations that lead to the unwanted behavior and ensuring the safety of all involved.
Agree 100%, but I think every dog trainer on earth will agree, easier said than done. Doesn't mean we don't try to adhere to that standard though, because I like that.
Many methods of changing behavior in dogs are effective.
That's an important point to remember. A lot of methods work if your measure is, does the dog do the thing that you asked? Positive reinforcement isn't the only thing in the world that accomplishes that.
However, the evidence-based veterinarian or behavior consultant should be concerned not just with what's effective, but with what does the least harm and produces the best long-term results. Current literature on dog training methods shows a clear advantage of reward-based methods over aversive-based methods with respect to immediate and long-term welfare, training effectiveness, and the dog-human relationship.
So they're talking about the bond, they're talking about the effectiveness, the
Welfare
of the individual dogs there. Like those are all components that need to be taken into account when you're teaching dogs. Is that basically what you're hearing here?
Yes, that is what I'm hearing. Exhaustive analyses of dog training literature have been completed and are available for review.
When we first heard that, we looked at the citation to be like, how exhaustive can this be? And it wasn't even that the 21 studies cited, it's about 21, right?
No, it is 21.
It is 21 studies, right, there they are. And we reviewed those, but it's like we just kept going down rabbit holes and rabbit holes like it is because they would reference other studies. So even though there's 21 referenced here, understand that that encompasses quite a bit of good science.
And a bit of science that can do better too, so.
Fair point, very true. What was particularly interesting, if you're the type of person who likes to just get to the bottom line, is that many of those studies, they're studies of studies, right? To try to kind of see where things are trending, how dogs are behaving with many different parameters, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the more data you have, the better of a trend you can see over time. Those studies cover all kinds of things, but a lot of it was looking at animal welfare as it relates to dog training. So are the dogs feeling stressed was a big question that was asked a lot. And they also compared the actual effectiveness of aversive-based methods to positive reinforcement methods. Comparing different training methods is very interesting. Even though so far research is indicating that aversive-based methods seem to generate stress in dogs, there is still a lot more research that needs to be done before we can draw a strong conclusion.
I imagine one of the hardest things to control for in these studies is consistency with the person, because we're not robots. I think a lot of us need to consider that as well.
Yeah, that's true. And dog training is very hard. As a non-dog trainer who has occasionally tried it, it's not easy for someone to just suddenly do it right. And so they need to make sure that they're selecting the right people who are representing the training methods being tested appropriately.
In recent years, too, there have been a lack of studies that directly compared positive reinforcement only methods with aversive methods, but that's really changed in the last several years too.
Also, a lot of the studies are either with working dogs, like military or police dogs, or laboratory dogs, a lot of beagles, and so it would be better if we could have more studies with companion dogs, people's actual pets that are living in their homes, which is complicated to study, and lots of different breeds, not just beagles and Malinois and German Shepherds.
Right, exactly. Like it's really hard to establish good control of an experiment with people's dogs. So a lot of these are also based on survey studies as well to try to gather information from different dog breeds, which isn't always ideal, but
that's true.
It's a great place to start, though. You can very often start to see a trend if you can get enough data, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good place to start. But that is one of the main challenges with studying dog training scientifically is that if you can have a really controlled experiment where you know what's happening to the dog 24/7, they live in a lab, obviously that's no one's pet.
It's difficult to simulate real world conditions in many of these. There's still some pretty amazing science out there, even with all of that considered.
I mean, of course, AVSAB are the ones who cited that study that summed up a lot of these objections as well. And so they're aware of them. They wrote this position statement with that in mind. No matter what your feelings are on this topic, it's so important to understand the current limitations of what we understand so that we can make it better and move forward. So we felt like that would be a good thing to talk about.
Yeah,
too.
and things can always change. This is just currently where we are right now, but new evidence makes us think about things differently very often.
I hope YouTube doesn't have a limit on description length because I have a lot of links for you guys. So we looked at all of those studies referenced in the AVSAB document and many of the studies referenced by those 21 studies. And then we still kept looking because there was a glaring lack of studies that supported the opposite viewpoint, that aversive training was preferable. And a lot of people believe that, and so we wanted to find more science that supports it.
I was really surprised. We did find some compelling studies, though. We definitely did, and we're going to cover them because I thought our time would be better spent rather than just going over the studies that we have a bias towards, I guess, or I'll speak for myself that I have a bias towards. I thought it was really important to delve into some of the best scientific cases for using aversive methods. I think we found two that were very commonly referenced out there as evidence by many to, I guess, support the use of using aversive methods and tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these would be the two most frequently cited that we were able to find.
We definitely don't want to be in our echo chamber. If I am wrong, I want to know it. I want to know where my flaws are. That's really what I try to do.
So the first one is a study that's been going around since 2014, and it compares the effectiveness of reward-based training and aversive training for off-leash recall around livestock and other dogs, which is really hard.
Yeah, those are distracting. The study found that the e-collar training didn't necessarily provide better or worse results than positive reinforcement training.
Yeah, it was basically a tie in training effectiveness.
So then what about the welfare of the dogs?
Right, they did, based on the body language and cortisol, the stress hormone. You guys know about cortisol?
Yeah, well, cortisol is associated with stress, both good stress and bad stress.
The best way we know so far to try to guess if a dog might be feeling stressed, which is a hard thing to guess, is to look at a combination of their body language. Do they look like they're looking stressed? And their cortisol, which they can test from their saliva or their blood.
Yeah, well
the stress hormone. Because stress isn't always bad.
Yeah, so for example, if they're hunched over, their ears are back, their tail's in between their legs.
Yeah, it's still a correlation because we can't know how dogs are feeling until we can read their minds someday.
One of the most frequent objections of the study was that the trainers were not using the e-collars properly according to modern e-collar trainers.
That's true, and actually it's weird because it's true that they didn't use them properly, but it's also true that that is a misrepresentation of the study.
Here's the thing. Phase one of the study was to make sure that they knew how to record the study. So they wanted to test their data collection method. So basically they got not necessarily skilled dog trainers or e-collar trainers. They wanted to make sure that they were able to do the observation properly.
Right, so the trainers and dogs in that little preliminary test didn't matter.
But those trainers we just talked about were not involved with the key part of the study. So they went out and got actual trainers who used e-collars in accordance with the manufacturer, manufacturer approved, basically.
Yeah, it was trainers that were really experienced and knew how to use it exactly as recommended by manufacturers.
Right, so we can get a good test. Ironically, this is one of the things that we really loved about this study was that they did find e-collar trainers who knew what they were doing.
So in the end, this study found a similar conclusion to what we've seen before, that the aversive corrections were effective, but they weren't more effective. It was basically a tie with aversive and positive reinforcement. However, the stress relations, the hormone and the body language score was worse for aversive. And so.
Okay, all right. So got the results, but animal welfare was in question.
I think it's important, just really quick, to clarify that just because their welfare is compromised, that doesn't mean these dogs are getting abused. We're not saying that. I think the researchers are not saying that either.
It's worth mentioning too, this can be an emotional issue for many people who are passionate about teaching dogs. I just want to reiterate that everyone is doing what they feel is best for their dogs. And I think as long as we're just all open-minded, in good faith, and we consider the data, that's the best we can do. And some of us may arrive at different conclusions based on that data, right? And that's why the science never ends.
That's true. That's why this was so interesting, because it's a really concerted effort to get a lot of data together and say, well, what's going on right now? What should we do moving forward?
We did find one study that seems to show that actually there are lower stress levels when you use an electric collar. What about this? What's that about?
So the study compared the results of 3 different types of corrections: an e-collar correction, a prong collar, a pinch collar correction, and a preconditioned quitting signal, which is something I had never heard of before.
Well, I mean, apparently they're defining quitting signal as something like a leave it alone. So if your dog is distracted by something and you say, hey, leave it, but you don't pull back on them, then that's how they were measuring that. Some people have taken some issues with how they taught that quitting signal.
So in the experiment, they had dogs go into a heel, and then a distracting person, another person, entice them to break their heel, basically.
Right.
And then when they broke their heel, they would be corrected in one of 3 ways.
Right. So in the study, they compared 2 types of positive punishment where you're applying a type of punishment. Prong collars and electric collars were used, and then the quitting signal was used as well.
So the conclusion of that study did say that e-collar training was more effective, less stressful. It was like the opposite.
Well, wait, more effective and less stressful than what? Positive reinforcement? The quitting signal is actually not positive reinforcement, it's negative punishment. And the study acknowledges that as well. But they didn't test against positive reinforcement, unfortunately. Would have been interesting.
Right, so while interesting, this study is one that I saw as one of the most frequently cited as comparing aversive punishments and positive reinforcement. And I think it's a misrepresentation in this case, or I guess it is.
So after looking at all of this evidence, some questions are bound to come up, and some really good ones. If positive reinforcement training is so great, why hasn't everyone just abandoned their tools overnight in favor of this?
True.
And furthermore, why aren't all of these dogs perfect now that we understand how they learn so well? I mean, we've seen plenty of examples over the years of dogs who've been trained with aversive methods, choke chains, prong collars, and do amazing things. I mean, look at the military, look at law enforcement. Very often, they tend to use those aversive tools as well.
Yeah, there's no denying that.
That's true, yeah, and they do a lot of great things, although that is starting to change. There are definitely military and law enforcement dogs being trained with reinforcement methods.
Yeah, links below.
So again, aversive methods clearly work in some capacity. Even though it seems like the data is telling us that positive training is more efficient, I don't think it's always easy. There's a lot of skill when you're doing positive reinforcement training because you kind of have to look at the world a little bit differently. You now have to be aware of what's surrounding your dog more rather than focusing on your dog. And you have to be prepared to modify the environment. And so it's not always the most intuitive way to think about teaching dogs, I think.
Right. Well, it isn't until it is.
I think Bree and I agree on the fact that that's always our goal on this channel, to try and demystify a lot of modern behavior.
We want to try to make it easier for you guys to understand and actually just practice naturally in your everyday life. The bottom line of this new position statement is that if you've tried everything in your training bag of tricks and, well, everything except for aversive punishments, I guess, and none of that is working and you don't know what else to do, the next step is no longer to try aversive corrections. Now you need to consult another trainer that's versed in science-based methods and see if they have a different idea.
Yeah,
which is a thing that, yeah, I've seen you actually do kind of a lot, so that's good.
I mean, good luck on trying to learn how to train dogs without doing it, right? You've got to definitely learn from other people's experiences in the spirit of science. I'll give you a good example. Early in my dog training career, I had a super cringy aspect to teaching stay, right? And so I put this out there on the internet because it was kind of like my intuitive way of teaching stay.
What would you do?
Like if a dog was going to break stay, I was really quick to physically intervene and prevent a dog from breaking stay.
So you would like grab them?
Yeah, I would grab them or prevent them. And even though my intention wasn't to create any type of fear within the dog when I corrected them, the fact was that method could very easily cause a dog to feel fearful, which is counterproductive to training. Gosh, I don't remember how the video was received, but I do remember Emily Larlam. A lot of you guys will know her as Kiko Pup.
Oh yeah,
here. Yeah,
she's awesome.
Oh, she's fantastic, absolutely. And I mean, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, by the way. All of you should subscribe to her channel. She's an extremely valuable resource in the dog training community for sure.
Yes.
And so, you know, she's like, okay, maybe you should look at it like this. I found that to be hugely helpful at that point in my career, and I've learned a lot of things from her over the years.
That's so nice. I didn't know that story. That's really great.
For some of us, it's a lot more intuitive to wait for your dog to react or do something you don't like to then punish it, right? That's, I think, human nature. Like, everything's fine, but if you mess up, I'm gonna let you know that you didn't do the right thing. And so the science is revealing that actually the opposite of that is true. Let me say that better. But despite our best intuitions, there are people out there who are uncovering ways to teach dogs to learn at least as fast, if not faster, with less welfare concerns, which is pretty exciting. Right, a lot of you know that I've dealt with reactive issues with Inertia, who's back there in the past. And Grisha Stewart gave me a lot of really helpful tips that have helped me make a lot of progress in Inertia's reactivity, so.
Yep, I'll have her links down there too. She's really cool.
Definitely. And so I've certainly benefited from learning from other scientific-based trainers and improving my methods over the years too. So for about the past 2 years in particular, we've really been focused on doing these deep dive training sessions, spending several weeks with a dog trying to implement positive reinforcement methods. Yeah, like 2 years ago, we were just like, put the mistakes in, put it all in, let's see how we work through them, because that's where the value is. That's what I wish was around when I was learning how to train dogs. I mean, I'm the first to admit it's a lot easier said than done. Some dog trainers will say that using aversives have worked really well and served them well, while other people will say positive reinforcement training has given them the best results they could ask for. When you genuinely feel that what you're doing is working extremely well with the dogs that you work with, it's really understandable that you wouldn't want to shut down the work that maybe you've potentially put years into crafting, you know, to just suddenly change your training strategy. I know that I applaud anybody who's skeptical of any of these studies or anything. I mean, it's important to be skeptical of things, but we can't just stop with our skepticism, I don't think anyway. So I say this just to remind everyone that anecdotes, my own included, are no substitute for scientific research. As quick as some of us dog trainers are to point out that science experiments are much different than the real world, we've got to remember that these researchers are exceptionally trained in the science of observation. We need to give the scientific community a ton of thanks for trying to give us some type of answer to these difficult questions. And by the way, AVSAB isn't the only organization that has come to this conclusion.
The British Veterinary Association, Australian Veterinary Association, American College of Veterinary Behaviorists. There's a lot. I feel like I shouldn't read you the guys the whole list, but I'll put them down below.
I mean, yeah, so it's really interesting that the best and brightest among us in the field of studying animal behavior are coming to new and different conclusions as time goes on, you know? By no means should any of us think that this is the final answer, because that's not what science is. I tried to be as skeptical as I've ever been about anything in preparing for this video, because truly, it's important that as I go on, I reevaluate things. Has anything changed? When was the last time I reevaluated my training methods? So that's what this has done for me. Basically, I just try to look and learn from people who are way smarter than me. I think that is the best life hack ever. I know that we will continue to be as transparent as we know how to be when we're showing you how to train dogs. And by all means, if you have any scientific studies that you think may have been omitted from anything we've talked about today, or if you have any new studies that you come across in the future, put them in the comments. This can be a great resource for me. I'm just kind of being selfish, honestly. So I've been asking myself as we've been doing this research, okay, is there anything that I'm going to change about the way that I train dogs? And I think that I'm going to try even harder to implement positive reinforcement in my training. I think I really need to be much more conscious of aversive consequences that come about when I'm working with a dog, whether I intend it to happen or not. And I know at the beginning of the video, we kind of listed some names and everything. Those are just some of the people that I thought of kind of off the top of my head, I guess, who I know have a lot of influence on YouTube in particular, because that's where I'm so focused all the time. I'm curious to know if anyone out there in the dog training community is considering changing any of the things they do, and I'm curious about what those things might be, if so, in light of this new compilation of scientific evidence. A lot of stuff to go over in the description for sure. We can talk about more of this moving forward if you guys like this kind of thing, but of course we are focused on our next series right now, which is, oh gosh. Check out our sponsor too, Nom Nom. Just go to trynom.com/Zach to get 50% off a 2-week trial. Get a copy of my books too. I talk about a lot of these topics and cite a lot of studies in both of my books. I'll have links below. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you know the drill. We'll see you in the next video.
Tell us what you think.
Bye guys.